Welcome to YourStory.com. I've got with me Ramnath Venkataraman, Senior Managing Director, Lead Integrated Global Services, Accenture Technology. He's here to talk about the now and next approach for organizations. We are in unprecedented times because of COVID-19. Businesses have to be resilient. Systems resilience is the key. And we're going to be covering that topic in detail today. Ramnath, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Vishal. Thank you for having me on your show. It's absolutely a pleasure to be talking to you.
How's New Jersey treating you?
New Jersey is treating me very well. Things are, it's getting brighter and sunnier by the day. You don't need any more strong woolen clothing. It's getting better. So the outlook is getting brighter.
Good to know. But we are here to talk about the now and next approach to be taken by organizations post this pandemic or during the pandemic. We are in troubled times, but you can tell us about the now and next approach. What is it actually, and what does it do for organizations and their systems resilience?
Thank you, Vishal. The way this pandemic has impacted people, organizations has been clearly unprecedented, right? So it's not something that anybody has had a precedence of knowing something that impacts not just one geography, not just one organization. It's just a pandemic. It's impacting every part of the world. And really, if you think about organizations and building resilience in their systems, the challenges that most organizations face are really fivefold. One is, how do you make sure that your business continues to stay operational? So business continuity is really a big part of the challenge. Second is huge surges and drops in volume. Some parts are going up, where digital commerce, things are going up dramatically, and some parts are really shrinking to pretty much nothing. So how do you deal with surges and drops in volumes? That's the second piece. Third, security becomes a huge consideration, right? So everybody's working remote. How do you make sure that in a remote environment, things continue to stay secure? The fourth is getting real-time data to be able to take very, very quick, effective decisions. And the last piece is to make sure that as people work remote, how do you ensure that there is the right level of productivity? So these are really the five big challenges that organizations face. And every organization needs to think about the now and next response to these five challenges in the current circumstances. And our research very, very clearly says not more than 10% are ready to face this challenge. We did this research across 8,300 companies, across different industries, across different geographies, and very clearly it comes out that not more than 10% are ready to be able to handle all of these challenges. 90% by corollary are not ready, which means that gap has to be bridged. And how do you bridge that gap is really thinking about six distinct building blocks from a systems point of view on how you cover this. The first is really do an assessment of what are your critical business areas that need immediate support. For example, in a retail organization, a distribution center is very, very critical. To make sure that that keeps running is very important, right? Underlying that, the systems that support those distribution centers is really critical. So how do you identify critical processes that need support? That's the first part. Having done that, then you look at vulnerabilities in systems that support those processes. And once you've identified the vulnerabilities, how do you bridge that gap is the six building blocks. First is you really drive hyper automation and make sure that things that can be automated really aggressively get automated. Second, you enable a very strong elastic digital workplace, which means you're enabling an environment where people can work remote and make sure that productivity doesn't drop. Third, make sure that the architecture and performance of your systems are really fine-tuned and you can take small, quick actions to release pressure from places where there are surges and drops, as we discussed. Fourth, leverage cloud in a significant manner and accelerate the journey which you would have otherwise taken 3 years to almost 3 months. Fifth, make sure that cybersecurity is at the heart of what you do and make sure that you're taking some specific pointed actions. And the last bit is to make sure that service continuity, which means you get pointed expertise to make sure service does not get disrupted, is at the heart of how you think about this. So starting from identifying the vulnerability and bridging that vulnerability gap with these 6 building blocks is how we are thinking about systems resiliency. And there are clearly companies that have gotten it right and are doing it very well, and some that are catching up very quickly after having identified the vulnerabilities.
I'd like to discuss with you, how did these 10% get it right? How did they organize their systems? Were they prepared from the beginning? Had they created compliances and policies to prepare for such an event as COVID-19? And why didn't the others do so? Just a simple question, please.
In any set, clearly there will be just by definition, there will be leaders and laggards curve that comes up. And these were, mind you, the research was self-responses, and half of the respondents were business C-suite and half of the respondents were technology C-suite. And based on their own responses on how they are embracing technology and how pervasive is that embracing of technology and what cultural change they've brought about in the organization was really how the research was organized. And very clearly, based on their own assessment, the pace at which they've changed, some organizations have gotten it right and they're sitting in the top 10%. None of them hopefully anticipated a pandemic, but frankly, it helped them. And Accenture is a good example, right? So we were 95% enabled for remote working very, even before the pandemic hit, and our ability to make sure that we leverage that quickly and use the infrastructure that we have with our cloud enablement has been a big part. And likewise, industry by industry, and it's all industries. There are leaders who have gotten it right and who are doing very well, who have resiliency built in. There are laggards who have not gotten it right and they're trying to catch up. So it's not that they anticipated the pandemic, but they were ready and using technology as a driver for business growth.
So, okay, it's good to segue into these verticals that we talked about earlier: automobile, retail, manufacturing. Things like Industry 4.0 has always been talked about, right? What's going on now? I mean, what are your thoughts on various industries? If we can also include healthcare, and that would be lovely. Yeah.
You think about. Let's start with healthcare, right? So think about the impact that it's had. Very, very quickly, a number of healthcare companies. I'll give you the example of National Health Services in the UK, where we're working with them very closely, and they had to very quickly enable their entire organization to be up on Teams within a matter of days, and get up and running to be able to respond to the surge in volumes that are coming up to the health service. And we partnered with Microsoft, got them enabled on Teams, and it's a hugely effective channel for making sure that they're being responsive to the needs of people. Likewise, a number of state governments have in North America have had to very rapidly respond, not just to the healthcare related pieces, but also to some of the economic relief and the measures that are being provided and the surge in volumes that every state is seeing based on people applying for benefits. So how do you deal with this has been a significant challenge in the current environment. And likewise, in other industries, I would say pretty much all industries, Vishal, have been significantly impacted in some manner or other, whether it's retail with volumes going down dramatically in brick and mortar and how things are changing, but surging in places like groceries, digital commerce just exploding. And how do you really transition and make that shift and make sure that the underlying systems that support this are resilient has been really a big part of how clients are looking at this.
Okay. When you talk about systems, right, it's your IT infrastructure, right? And many of them today have to think like an IT company. They have to launch, what is this, social distancing products or, contactless payments, right? You can see that in retail, although American retail offered it for the longest of time where you can self-scan and go. Not many used it. Still, people were going to the lines, right? I think that's become a new normal, right? Everybody talks about a new normal. There was a new normal in 2010 when people talked about the cloud. And now the new normal is all these applications that help you transform yourself.
No, absolutely. We don't like to use social distancing. We like to use physical distancing. You retain your social connection, but you maintain physical distancing. So we've started using this as you still want to interact socially with people and make sure
Correct.
that you're
Correct.
staying connected, but you need the physical distance, and that's been a big part of how retail is organized, especially in North America, where I have direct visibility to what's happening on the ground. It's working very, very effectively. How it's been a huge culture change, right? So people, the mindset of making sure that you're maintaining that physical distance, you're respecting what is good for you and what is good for others, has been absolutely terrific, and underlying systems that support this, with point of sale systems and the rapid changes that retailers have had to do with this has been dramatic, and making them. And a great example is for a retailer who was pretty much largely a brick and mortar retailer. They saw a huge surge in volumes, and we've enabled their digital channel. Their digital volumes have gone up 400%, not 400%, right, overnight. And enabling their digital commerce channel to be able to take care of that has been is a real life example of how organizations are facing this challenge, and how one needs to think about responding very, very quickly.
Interesting answer. And what about manufacturing? I need to ask you that because everybody's saying manufacturing has to come back. That's the one that offers jobs. What is systems resilience in manufacturing for you?
You remember I told you about surges and drops in volumes. I mean,
Correct.
in some parts, there's been a huge drop in volumes, and they've had to figure out how to make sure that you're keeping the basic systems up and running while anticipating and making sure that as things come back, and things are coming back. If you look at what's happening with the automotive industry in North America, things are slowly starting to come back. The ability to make sure that the systems are in a state of readiness has been one of the biggest parts of the manufacturing industry. They didn't see a surge in volumes. Some supply chain volumes went up in discrete manufacturing, where there's a huge jump up in volumes. Digital commerce volumes went up in places like industrial. But a lot of them have had to be in a wait and watch mode, where there was a significant drop in a number of areas, including manufacturing. And they're all in a state of preparedness to make sure that as volumes pick up, there is a state of readiness to be able to handle that.
Interesting. I also have to bring in startups simply because we are your story. Do you see startups being more resilient at this point of time because of their digital nature? Oh. And do you think large companies should collaborate with them?
This is my view of the startup ecosystem. And I was talking to a friend who's joined a startup after working for a very large organization. He's joined a startup, and they're doing some very, very interesting things. And we were talking about how we can collaborate. I think that ecosystem, the partnership of how agility and innovation, which is now really being redefined. You can do innovation and thought leadership sitting across the globe. And we are driving this. We're driving design thinking workshops, thinking in a remote manner, right? So you're bringing together a collection of people and driving small minimum viable product ideation that can be very, very quickly implemented. And in that scenario, the startup ecosystem is even more relevant, where partnership with startup ecosystem is going to be critical, because the nimbleness and the agility with which minimum viable products can be tested and scaled has become it's proven now a lot more than what it was in the past. So I think the startups are going to be a critical linchpin in driving thought leadership and innovation.
I mean, this also goes with your 6 building blocks very well. You have the elastic digital workforce that you want to talk about. Let's talk about that in detail. Going remote is the key, but how do you go remote? How do you increase productivity, right? There's something that you could tell us. There are a lot of tools, like Teams itself, right? We are remote. It's like a digital workplace, right? How do you measure productivity? Do you want to touch upon this point a bit? How will this digital workplace for organizations increase over the next 12 months or even forever now, I think?
No, I think if you see, I'll tell you, the digital workplace, or the digital home is here to stay. Um, if you know the dramatic shift. My mother lives with us. She's 77. Okay, and if you had she wouldn't have known what Zoom was, what Facebook Live was 2 months back. And now she's probably one of the most avid users of Zoom. She'll teach me a few things on how to make sure that the tricks and tips of navigating through this in the digital workplace. So I think it's here to stay. I think it's gonna make the world richer. If you take our example, right? So we've got over 500,000 employees. We've moved completely to a remote working environment pretty much overnight. Our volumes, we do 900 million minutes of audio through Teams every month.
Wow.
900 million minutes, right? So somebody was doing the math for me. It's apparently 1,700 audio years worth of volume in 1 month. Our video volumes have gone up 5x. I think things are going to change quite dramatically. I'm not saying that the need for social interaction is going to completely go away. It is going to stay, but it's going to be not because you necessarily have to go to a place of work, but you want to go to a place of work. So it's going to be a mix of working remote with a collaborative environment, with companies coming together and thinking about how to drive thought leadership, how to drive innovation, how to drive collaboration with the right infrastructure and resiliency built in, but come together when you need to and make sure that you're continuing to collaborate. So I think that's really where the world is going to move towards.
When you talk about the cloud, I mean, I think now organizations should think about the cloud more seriously. And also the fact that innovation on the cloud is so much more faster, better. And how do you rejig your entire architecture to the cloud at this point of time? Say if I'm a bank, or even healthcare, again, let's go back to that. They have to re-architecture very fast, but they can. No, under current systems, I think moving to the cloud can be done in a matter of 6 months with your legacy systems. I think that's where the technology has reached. So maybe I thought you could talk about both cloud acceleration and new architectures.
So if you think about, I spoke about leaders and laggards. Yeah, you remember the initial research that we did. Everybody who was a leader was on a journey which was significantly on the cloud. We are 95% on public cloud. Accenture 95 is 95% on the public cloud, and ability to react has been very, very quick. But if you look at the overall volumes, it's about 20 to 30% which is sitting on cloud. And everybody who's been able to migrate to the cloud has had the ability to not just flex up and down, but also have the right amount of resiliency built in, because it's a very secure, agile environment where you can make changes in a rapid manner, whether it's a bank, whether it's a retailer. I think this is going to accelerate very quickly. What would have taken 5 years as part of the business plan to accelerate to the cloud, I think people are going to do it in 6 months. And you're seeing evidence of that with volume surging, irrespective of which hyperscaler you talk about, whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Alibaba, all of them are seeing a huge surge in volumes, and it's going to accelerate. And companies that embrace this with the right architecture, like you said, leveraging microservices, are really going to lead. And the speed of migrating is going to be key, because if you don't migrate at speed, it's going to differentiate you from who wins in the marketplace and who doesn't. So I think this is going to be a huge, huge driver for growth.
Okay, quickly, when you talk about architecture and performance engineering, say if I'm a mid-sized company and I want to choose a cloud architecture, what would you, let's not get into the names of specific companies, but what architecture would you recommend in terms of databases, networks, right? And also kind of AI kind of platforms to enable your performance engineering?
So Vishal, I'm not an expert on technical architecture. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can come back with somebody who can provide the right response.
Why not?
What architecture is right for mid-sized companies and by industry. But very clearly moving to a nimbler, more agile architecture, which is decoupled, right? Mm-hmm. You need to have the back-end, mid-office, back-office applications using a different architecture, but the front office, which is customer-facing architecture, which is more nimbler, helping you drive microservices, is absolutely going to be the key. in a manner which you can peel from the data layer, generate with pings and provide analytics that can drive decision making.
So it's kind of mostly like a SaaS kind of a model, if I can ask you that, right? It's the old SaaSification of the world has begun, it seems, with the cloud.
Well, the SaaSification was already a big part of the world. It's going to continue to absolutely accelerate. No two ways about it.
Okay.
No two ways about it.
Okay, cybersecurity is something that we also. What happened recently in a webinar? People were using a startups platform, and it got bombed with a lot of attacks. Right? What do you think is going to happen with this new form of collaboration, new form of creativity being unleashed by organizations, productivity? Cybersecurity seems to be in the center of everything. But how do you actually prepare for such a scenario? Because personally, I have hundreds of people selling me security tools for my own organization. How does a CIO, CTO behave today?
First, I very clearly it needs to be elevated as a responsibility. Most organizations have already done it. It needs to be the front and center as far as mindset is concerned. It's a lot about not just leveraging the tools and techniques because they are available, but it's a question of making sure that the mindset is right. And you've got a pervasive culture of making sure that security is at the top of everybody's mind as they think about how things work. I mean, it starting with me, right? So we've got we've got an environment where we test people on phishing attacks. Yeah. So, and I used to fall for that 2 years back. I don't fall for that anymore. Right? We do that internally as testing. And that pervasive culture of making sure that that's embedded in your DNA is really critical. Now, the strategy for what tools and techniques you adopt, that needs to be embedded proactively as you build systems. And it needs to be a part of your DNA. And cloud, in a number of ways, enables that a lot more effectively than what was possible in an on-prem environment. So combining all of these elements with the construct where there is an organizational top-down approach on security, making sure that that's empowered, and is a pervasive culture on making sure that this is part of everybody's DNA is really what is required.
Okay, great answer. I also want to talk about automation. I think we cannot end any conversation without automation to autonomous. Should we be scared of automation and also in the future autonomous systems? Is that a great way to look at a business case going forward?
If you read the book that Paul Doherty and Jim wrote, it's called Human Plus Machine, and that does a beautiful articulation of where the world is going. Is automation here to stay? Is it going to accelerate? It absolutely is. There's no two ways about it. But it's going to be in a collaborative human plus machine. We all have to think about how we reinvent ourselves, like my mom did. She's reinvented the way she is doing social communication, right? So I think it's an opportunity. Do we have to continue to think about tweaking our skill set and making sure that we are relevant? Absolutely, yes. Is automation here to stay? Whether it's in, you spoke about autonomous driving, that's going to continue to accelerate. But new opportunities will come up, and human plus machine is really where the power is going to be. And it's not it's an opportunity for everybody to reskill and make sure that you're taking it to the next stage and leveraging it the right way.
Great answer. People, how do people like you, you leaders handle such a situation today? You motivate so many people, such big teams. How did you react after March? How was the situation for you as an individual, and how did you react to handling such a huge team, which is global in nature?
The first thing is making sure that empathy is a big part of what you do. Okay, as a leader, empathy needs to be at the core of how you respond in a crisis like this. And that's been a driving philosophy for me, and making sure that having the right kind of empathy, putting people first and making sure that they're secure, they're safe. Every conversation that you're now starting, and it's been our CEO downwards, how's everybody doing? How are things? And being a lot more personal about asking is really how you drive that leadership behavior, not jumping in and being inconsiderate of what people are going through, because everybody's sitting at home and working in an environment where I had this call with a team where suddenly the 2-year-old jumped in and but that's the new reality, and being empathetic and making sure that that's part of your work culture and embracing that, and making sure that you're proactive about it is really what's leadership all about. Making sure that you're carrying people. There are some tough decisions that you have to take, but making sure that you're empathetic about it, carrying it, and leading it by example is key. And the second, I would say, is both mentally and physically keeping yourself in the right frame of mind, right physical fitness levels, or staying active is another piece for me personally that's hugely important, because that then translates to how I spend the rest of my day.
Great. And what advice you give to young startups? Also, do you see this as a new age for IT services? Because there's so many companies are going to come back to you folks and say, please help us transform at this point of time.
So, like we discussed, right, decades worth of innovation is going to happen in months. And what better environment than that for startups to thrive? And I think it's going to be a great time for new thinking, having the patience and making sure that you're not getting worried about the current context, but thinking about what's coming next after this is going to be key for young startups that think about what next, because this is going to accelerate what's going to happen with the innovation ecosystem, and that's where startups thrive. So I would strongly encourage to continue to take calculated risks, have the mindset of driving innovation, because this is probably a point of inflection for some of these things.
What about the IT services world? Great time.
I think it's always a interesting time in the IT services world. We'll continue to see how it evolves as we go through the crisis and come out of it. It will be a process of evolution in the IT services space, and we'll see where it lands.
And what books are you reading? How are you spending time during the pandemic? Is it documentaries for you or books?
I'm seeing a lot of doing binge watching over the weekends on a number of things. I'm seeing the Netflix series on One Planet right now. Absolutely fascinating. And David Attenborough is one of my favorite. When I hear his voice, it just makes me, it's just so soothing. And I've been watching a number of other really fast-paced series, which I'm sure everybody else is doing that too. But that's one part. I do a lot of reading. I'm right now reading Ajaya, which is a very fascinating look at the Mahabharata story, which is from the point of view of Duryodhan. He doesn't call Duryodhan, but he calls him Suyodhan. So how do you think about a story that you've always seen from the winner's point of view, but see that point of view from the empathetic view from a person who's sitting on the other side is fascinating. So I just love it. I love Anand Neelakantan's writing style. So that's what I'm reading now. Apart from my boss has written Human Plus Machine, I'm reading it again. Those are things that I'm doing right now.
Great. You stay safe. Everybody on this call, stay safe. Thank you, Accenture, for being on the show. And I think I should see you soon in India, or I should come and visit you in New Jersey, Ramnath.
Absolutely, Vishal. I would love to host you in New Jersey, or I'm in Bangalore all the time. Once the restrictions lift, I should be there, and we'll meet in person soon. Stay safe.
Look forward. Thank you. You too. I'll see all the love to your family. I'll see you soon. Okay?
See you.